Hi everyone. Welcome to the OUM community and welcome to my conversation with Dr. Elza. I'm Associate Professor Nicolette McGuire and I'm OUM's Associate Dean for Student Engagement. And I'm joined today by Dr. Elza Pollock-Christian, who is our Director for Clinical Education and Faculty. So Talofa to you, Fabrice and Greg, and bonsoir to Crystal and Mahari, and hello to Mesh and Renee and Kiora, to Sheila and Wanya, to any of you joining us via recording. Bienvenue des futurs étudiants et les nouvelles étudiantes de classe 2500 Welcome to prospective students, and I also see some new students of cohort 2502 who will be starting week next week. I want to wish everyone in the OUM community, including everyone here today and everyone joining us via recording, a Manawatia, a Matariki, which is the Aotearoa New Zealand Maori New Year, which is a time for reflection and remembrance and renewal. It's a connection to family, the Wanoa, and to land Wenua. So I hope that you'll take some time during this webinar to reflect on your future career, your future life as a medical school, medical student, and how OUM as a medical school can be a part of your future plans. So welcome to everyone, and welcome to Dr. Elza, our distinguished guest from today. So Elza, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Dr. Elza Paula Christian. I am a pediatrician, and I've been the director of clinical education at OUM since December, and it's been a really great experience. I am Canadian. I did my undergraduate degree at McGill University, and then I went on abroad to the Cayman Islands to do my medical degree. And that was probably the best thing I've done because I met my husband there. And I also got a degree. I matched to residency, and I'm grateful every day that I get to see, examine, and treat children and get to teach students about clinical medicine. So overall, I'm very grateful for the experience I had, and I encourage everyone to go abroad and study medicine outside of Canada. And that much so that my two younger sisters, who are twins and they're 12 years apart from 12 years younger than me, they did the same. They had a similar experience, and they also were very grateful for it.
So are both of your sisters, both of them went to medical school as well?
Yep, one went to Ireland, and she's actually just received a position in Australia.
Oh, wow, that's
And the
exciting.
other twin went to the Caribbean, and she just matched in the US.
Well, you are a very international family. You guys.
Yes, we are.
So, Dr. Elza, how did you become involved with the OUM community?
I love teaching. I've always loved teaching medical students when I'm on my clinicals. When I'm rounding in the hospital, I usually have a third or fourth year student with me. And now that I've been practicing for about 8 years, I decided that I want to do more teaching. And so when I started looking for more positions where I'm doing more lectures and teaching, OUM came up and I was able to join. And it's been a really great experience teaching students internationally who are not just in Samoa, but are in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the US.
Thanks for letting us know about that. So, if any of you have questions for myself or Dr. Elza throughout this webinar, please go ahead and use the Q&A box. We also have some questions that have been submitted to us from you via your admissions officers. So we'll be running through those questions today to give you as much information as we can about OUM's service to Canadian students and how our university is working to address some of the physician shortage in Canada. But we also welcome students from the United States, from Aotearoa, New Zealand, from Australia, from Samoa, and from American Samoa, in addition to Canada. So perhaps you're here with us today from one of those locations as well, and would like to know a little bit more about Canada or have some questions about your jurisdiction as well. So even for the moment, if you'd like to let us know in the Q&A box where you're joining us from, we would love to be able to welcome you and give a shout out to your Wenua, because we're focusing on a reflection of the lands in which OUM is providing service. And if you are Canadian, like Dr. Elza and myself, you might recognize our backgrounds, which are showing Jasper National Park. We were just joking before the webinar started, because Dr. Elza is from the more eastern part of Canada, whereas I'm from BC, the western part of Canada. And she was saying, well, she'd never been in the western part of Canada, and I'd never been in the eastern part of Canada before, but now I actually live in Ontario. Anybody who's been to our previous webinars might have heard me say I'm joining you from tiny Ontario, which is in fact a tiny community north of Toronto. So I see that Crystal is from Puerto Rico and Mesh is from Canada as well. So thanks for letting us know. And if anyone else wants to give a shout out to their location, please go ahead and use the Q&A box. You're also welcome, if you have a question, to put questions in the Q&A box, or if you'd like to take the microphone to ask a question, then please go ahead and use the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom panel. So Dr. Elza, how do you think OUM is kind of different from the other universities that you've been to in Canada and in the Caribbean, and maybe you've been involved with some US universities as well? What makes OUM different from other places where you have learned or taught?
So OUM is actually nothing like no other institution that I've ever experienced. And I think it's actually amazing, and what interested in me to join the faculty. And that is because we can do your first 2 years remotely. So you get to stay home. And for most, Canadians who go abroad, those first 2 years are really difficult to go away, be away from family, and then to be studying really, it's a really tough time. It's a lot of information you have to learn, and sometimes it's actually nice to be away from family, but most of the time you
A
do
little bit of time.
need their support. You need them to help you. You need your significant others to be around you, and this program allows you to do that. And it's really a very rare program that is accredited that can do that for you. So that is what is really attractive. And if I had known, or if I had known about the program, I think this would have been a really good option for me or my sisters.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I will speak with students and prospective students all the time about the importance of like their support system, like the people around them that are providing them the support. They have all the learning to do, but you need people around you to help you when you're in medical school. And we also talk about like the benefits of being able to stay home, but like for whatever reason, I just never really made that connection about how powerful it is to have the support system where you already are and to not have to access that from afar. And OUM really assists with that in being able to take your preclinical courses. That is, your courses on things like the cardiovascular system and the respiratory system and the reproductive system. All those courses are taken online in virtual classrooms like this, and in classes that are recorded as well. And you get to interact with people all over the world, but you can just sit in your favorite coffee shop, or you can sit in your at your kitchen table and go to school and have that kind of international experience, and have while having your support system around you, and while being from in the comfort of your own home. So I like that you made that point. Thanks for bringing that.
And during COVID, my sisters both returned home because they had to. They were still paying rent in Ireland, they were paying rent in the Caribbean, but they were home and they did their first 2 years online. They had to, and most schools are still doing majority of coursework online, still, despite forcing their students to be local as well. So to me, that opportunity to spend a little more time with family is really critical. I think it's really important.
I think the pandemic really upended a lot of our notions for how medical education needs to be conducted, and also like for everyone personally, what was important for us as individual people in our lives. And I think that at OUM we really kind of came from having this background already of being able to teach medicine in this hybrid curriculum for the past like 20 years. And so we didn't have this steep learning curve that other universities had. We already had this type of learning by design. This is something for those of you who caught the last webinar with Dean Robinson, who is our Dean for North America and Australia. She and I were chatting a little bit about how we kind of like, there wasn't a learning curve for us to do that. Our courses were already designed that way. So our students really had an advantage there, and with their clinical rotations as well, which we can talk about in a little bit. And I think, it helps to have really wonderful, diverse faculty with different types of experiences from all over the world. Like, you and I might never have had a chance to teach at the same university or within the same classes if we didn't have a structure like OUM. And students might never have had the opportunity to be in a class with a student in Christchurch in New Zealand, or in Apia in Samoa, while at the same time, eating cereal at 6 a.m. and attending class. So I think we have this really wonderful opportunity to connect with each other in a way that we wouldn't otherwise. So anyways, I'm really happy that you joined our community and that you found us. So tell us a little bit about why you like teaching students at OUM, what's rewarding for you. And you can talk a little bit about the areas that you teach in. I didn't ask you about that before. So tell us a little bit about your area and what you find rewarding
Yeah.
about teaching students
And,
at
and just speaking on what you mentioned is just, I love when I do meet with students, I love learning a little bit of where they're located, how they ended up there. And there's students, there's Americans living in New Zealand, there's Canadians living in Australia. There's just a really diverse student body, and it's really nice to meet and learn from them. And I think that is a really unique concept at OUM as opposed to other schools. And that's what I love teaching. Now, I do teach clinical medicine. And as you know, the clinical medicine is a little different in every country. And so the other real nice value that I get from OUM is you get to learn how things are done in different places. And that can add to the creativity that you have when you practice medicine. I actually was an artist. I was painting, and my plan in life was to be a graphic designer. I had a portfolio. And then, parents and everybody was like, no, you can't. And so I really was upset when I ended up going to medical school. I still don't know how that all happened, but I really found creativity in treating patients in low resource settings, and that's where I really thrive. And OUM really fits that model, and why I also was attracted to teaching here is because of Samoa and mo even Australia and New Zealand. It's definitely a lower resource setting than the United States. Canada, because of the public healthcare system, I do view it in a way that, we do ensure our resources are spent correctly. So we're definitely not overutilizing them. And just learning the art of that process is allows for creativity, and that's what I love. And I think part of teaching at OUM is something we teach the students because our goal is really to um, create general practitioners or family doctors.
Yeah. I didn't know that medicine was your backup career.
It was, it definitely was my backup.
I think for me, like have always been very interested. I mean, from the time that I knew what it was anyway, I was always really interested in the role of hormones and shaping our physiology and in the reproductive system in particular. So I knew that I like really wanted to be involved in that. And I originally heard about OUM like in 2012 because I had wanted to be a professor, but my family circumstances just dictated that I wasn't able to finish my postdoc or move on to my second postdoc, which was pretty common in the area that I was training in. And so it just necessitated that I needed to stay in one place.
Mhm.
And that place just happened to be like rural Vancouver Island.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and so OUM just allowed me to do that, to stay in academia, but to be able to stay and take care of my family, which was really important to me. And I had the opportunity to work with the health system in BC, and I was traveling all over in BC. Like people just think about Vancouver, I don't know if we have any British Columbians on the webinar with us today. Shout out to British Columbians. But BC is very rural and remote anywhere you go outside of
Mhm.
Vancouver. And I was going to so many communities and just being like, we need doctors. Like all these communities need doctors. We have a real shortage of people who are willing to and able to be clinicians in rural and remote areas. So I got very interested in trying to promote and support skill building and opportunities for people who wanted to practice in rural and remote areas. And that extends beyond BC. We see similar circumstances in Australia as well. Like in Sydney and in Brisbane, like there's tons of hospitals and jobs there, but there are many rural and remote hospitals when you get outside the coastlines in Australia that are in dire need of clinicians. And then in Samoa as well, the whole reason our university was founded was to try to address the physician shortage in Samoa. So I really like that foundation of our university. And of course, not all the students who graduate from OUM are going to be family medicine practitioners or
Mhm.
internal medicine or in pediatrics or practice in rural and remote areas. But even if you end up in surgery, like in urban Florida or something like that, you're still going to get a rounding of your education. You're still going to gain important skills in having that basis as part of your education at OUM. So I really like that about here too. Well, what do you think? How do you think medical education has changed in the last few years, maybe in Canada and beyond, and any predictions for how it might change in the future?
I think we're trying to really get away from it being so scientific and focusing on the whole person approach. Canadian medical schools are really focusing away from looking at all the statistics and looking at the individual and focusing on those who have humanities backgrounds, who have done courses like outside of the sciences, because we realize that communicating with our patients, connecting with them is really important than just knowing the science behind all the conditions and the procedures because the patients aren't, seeking the care. It's becoming very fearful um, area, and patients are trying to go to people who are, nice and open and communicate well instead of those that are very knowledgeable but not friendly, right? So, really getting that experience at OUM where you're interacting, and I know it sounds like, oh, well, it's virtual, but I do feel like you're communicating more than because you're forced to communicate. And
Yes.
I will say I'm an introvert, and having to do all these Zoom teaching and things like that really gets you to learn a lot of social skills that you may have not thought you needed to. So it's a different platform, but it is the future. Telehealth is really how we get access to care in rural areas, and learning how to do this effectively, study groups, talking to your professors, is really an important part of medicine. And this is the change. And that's why I see OUM as a really important part of where medicine is going to go and medical education.
Um, I like what you said because patients are not sets of signs and symptoms and lab results, right? They're people. Well, I think with the um, tools that we have now around like artificial intelligence, like of course it's important to know the scientific information, to be able to connect that information in your mind, to be able to get to diagnoses and treatment plans and all of that. But you also have to be a person, right? That's someone can connect with and can relate to. And I think what you said is going to be true as well, that more and more it's going to be, can you be relatable in a virtual setting, not just when you are face to face with someone, because we're going to continue to have people in more and more rural and remote settings or with barriers to accessing care or barriers to transportation where they simply cannot get to where the doctors are. The doctors are going to have to find some way of getting to them. So how do you have those um, empathetic and humanitarian types of skills and be able to translate those in a virtual setting? One of the things that really interested me when I was doing lots of visits across BC is there was um, an intensivist team at Victoria General Hospital, and they were providing care to a patient in Bella Bella, like in northern BC, but they were doing it like in telemedicine, and they were using instruments that they had control of, but
Oh,
they were
wow.
able to actually like robotically control them so that they could have a patient go into like a treatment room where they were not, but they could take measurements of that patient. And so
Wow.
I also think like we also have this model that's going to be very translatable to these types of like remote or robotic or other types of tools where we are remotely having instrumentation or remotely running lab or kinds of tests and having to work with patients in that way. So I'm interested to see like in the next 5 or 10 years um, how we have like our clinical skills and clinical cases that we do in an online setting, even during the clinical period that enhances students' education when they're on rotations, and those basic clinical skills that they learn in the preclinicals and transition, like how are those going to start to be more enhanced as we get into this type of field. So I'm really interested to see where that all goes. So we always have lots of questions about clinical rotations and what's happening in the clinical time period. And you're the best person to have for some of that, since our director for preclinical, or sorry, our director for clinical education. And so let's take some of those questions now because we have a few in our Q&A box, and we can talk a little bit more about clinical rotations across the area that OUM serves. So Mahari, who is from Toronto, is related to clinical rotations. And they'd like to know, do you have Canadian students who did clinical rotations in Canada or future plans to arrange the opportunity to have designated areas in Canada? So I can answer part of that, but Dr. Elza, do you want to talk a little bit about how the clinical courses are designed to ensure students who are from our diverse areas have access to the appropriate information that they need to support their training?
Yeah, so typically when you complete your preclinicals and you move on to your rotations, most of the time your main source of education is that rotation itself, where you're attending clinic with a supervisor and they're teaching you, and then you're doing reading, and then you're taking an exam. At OUM, because our areas are so diverse, we do have a module that we provide that you follow and you learn from, and then you do take an exam on our Moodle classroom as well, and we support you virtually during that rotation. So if it happens that you don't have a supervisor that is very academic, or they're not, they're so busy that they don't have the time to teach you, you're still learning. You're learning all the time because you're watching what they're doing. You're watching them examining patients. You're hopefully also examining patients and interacting with the patients as well. But we're also there as backup to help you learn from these experiences. You do get to write case reports on these patients, and we meet with you as well. We have clinical core specialists in each area of the core rotations, and they are usually we have one from the North American side and one from the Australian side that kind of help us provide um, learning from those parts of the world. So, and then you will have your Samoa experience. Some of you, I think. And not, does everyone have to do it, Nicolette? Yes. Okay.
This is a question. This is a question that was submitted, so I'll hold that one. I'll say
Okay.
yes, but I'll give that short answer and I'll get back to it. Please go on.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And in terms of these other rotations, majority of the core rotations are usually done in the US. But we do have opportunities to do elective rotations in Canada. And myself, as a Caribbean student, I did end up doing 8 week rotations, 8 weeks of rotations in Toronto as well at Sick Kids. So that was a wonderful experience. So there are different,
Experience have
oh, it was such a good experience. Yeah. So you do have those opportunities there, and it just depends where you're located, which province, and what is available, and also if if you have friends or family that can assist with getting those rotations.
So we have, at the moment, we have 351 students, which is like pretty high for us.
Hmm.
And but only 7 of our current students are Canadian. So I think we have 2 in BC, 1 in Alberta, 1 in Saskatchewan, and 3 in Ontario at the moment. We have 3 Canadian students who have graduated. But 2 are practicing in Alberta and 1 in Saskatchewan. So we have had students who have done clinical rotations in Canada. In terms of future plans, Mahari, to arrange designated areas in Canada, we would, because of the size of our Canadian student body at this time, we would probably do that on this case by case basis that Dr. Elza was talking about, which is a service that we offer for all of our students across our 5 jurisdictions. That if there's a particular site that you'd like to rotate at, if you have a connection there, if you'd like us to make a connection, we can do that. Each site has to pass our quality standards. So there's a process that kind of goes back and forth. So we don't guarantee any particular sites until they've gone through that process with us. So there is a possibility of having rotations at preferred sites closer to where you live, but we don't guarantee any of that. I can say that we have had Canadian students who have done clinical rotations in Canada. Um, the the uh, the one of the graduates in Alberta and one in Saskatchewan did half their rotations in the US and half in Canada. For all our Canadian students, we have them on what we call our USMLE pathway, the United States Medical Licensure Exam pathway, where we give you the preparatory time and materials to take the US medical licensure exams as well as the Canadian medical licensure exams. And the reason for this is to allow for you to have your rotations in both the US as well as in Canada, because most, if not all, clinical rotation sites in the United States require USMLE Step 1, and it doesn't hurt at all to have that when you're looking for rotations in Canada as well. We also support our US students to complete their USMLE Step 2, and any other students who would like to undergo the match for residency in the US. We also support to complete Step 2. For our Canadian students, we have prep for the MCC QE and NAC exams, which are required for the CARMS, the Canadian Residency Matching Service. And if we have any Australians, we have newly approved AMC preparatory program, which is the Australian Medical College exam as well. So we offer a suite of preparatory programs for all of the licensure exams in each of the countries that we represent. So we want to make sure that you have lots of options for where you can apply and are eligible for residency. Okay. I don't know if I want to talk a little bit about, well, I'll talk about, we can talk about licensure in a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the Samoa rotation. So Dr. Elza was saying, oh, well, what about the Samoa rotation? So have you heard anything from any of your students about their experiences in the Samoa rotation? Have you got any information from Dean George about that? Anything you want to offer to students about what they can expect in doing a clinical rotation in Samoa? And then I'll fill in the gaps.
So the students absolutely love their rotations in Samoa, and they sometimes wish they could do all of them there. And you have that opportunity. Um, just from looking at the case studies that I received from students in Samoa, these are conditions you'll never see. I've never seen practicing in the United States. Super rare, super important to know about, but this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity to learn clinical medicine there, where you're actually learning not just how to order labs and read studies and review things on the computer. You're actually learning how to examine patients and learn diagnostic skills that you really don't have that opportunity. You also get to do things, procedures, IV placements, be really part of the team, just because you're really supporting the hospital there, that we have, and students absolutely love their experience there.
So I have only ever heard wonderful things as well. So all OUM students have to complete a minimum of 4 weeks of clinical rotation in Samoa at our dedicated site at TTM Hospital in Apia, the capital city in Samoa. And a lot of students choose to do more than 4 weeks if they can. The most popular rotations are probably OBGYN, because students often will, I cannot guarantee this, but a lot of students have had opportunities to deliver and catch babies, which they really enjoyed, scrub into surgeries, etc., as well as the psychiatry, either core or elective in Samoa, because those students get to go out into the broader community and be a part of mental health screening. So you get to kind of like travel around Samoa as well and get a real sense of what it's like to practice medicine in Samoa. You get to like learn more about the culture, learn more about the people, be out and in the community, like really practicing hands-on medicine. So I always hear like rave reviews from about all different types of rotations, but those two in particular are the most popular. So highly recommend. Okay, let us take some more questions from our Q&A. So Crystal had asked about clinical rotations in Puerto Rico. So we'll just give the same information as before, that we arrange things on a case-by-case basis. So no hard yes, no hard no, but yes, we would look at that on a case-by-case basis. And she has also asked, do I apply to the regular FAFSA for student loans? And our class is only 3 days a week. What time would they be, comparing this from Puerto Rico? So we don't currently have students applying through FAFSA for student loans in the US. We do have Canadian students who are applying through their provincial loan offices who do have student aid. And we have a number of Australian students who have private student aid as well. Our OUM Student Association is the place to go for the most current information on where students are getting financial aid and how students do their financial planning. So you're welcome to reach out to them if you want a little bit more information about your situation in particular. And Crystal wanted to know about, the timing of the classes. So I can talk a little bit about the timing of the preclinical classes, which are your first couple of years in the program. Dr. Elza, do you want to talk about the timing of clinical classes? So what should people, plan for their study and their time in clinical rotations in the second half of their medical school timing?
And so we, focus on a asynchronous studying. So that means you're kind of doing it on your own time. So we have lectures available to you to listen to when you have time off rotation. We can set up meetings to discuss topics. Again, those are set outside of rotation hours, but the priority is really your clinical rotation. But the classroom is really virtual and asynchronous. That's our goal, meaning that you can study as at the time that you have. Many of our students have families, have their own children, or are caretakers to family members, so they're able to get everything accomplished. It's not easy, but they do manage it and they are successful. But um, that is how the clinical courses work.
Thanks, Dr. Elza. And I'm going to roll Renee's question into my answer to Crystal as well, because Renee asked for, could we please give a general overview of the program? So sure, we can. So the first 2 to 2.5 years is your preclinical portion. That's when you're taking your general principles, which is like a foundational course. And then you're taking your cardiovascular system. You take one class at a time. Then you take urinary system, pulmonary system, endocrine system, yada, yada, yada. There's 10 system courses. So for the preclinical years, you have class 3 days a week on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. If you're in North America, it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 8 p.m. And if you are in Australia, on Australian Eastern Standard Time, that's Brisbane time, then it's also, your classes are on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 8 p.m. So there is a class that is a case discussion class. There is a class that is a problem-based learning class. And there is a class that helps you to uh, what's the word I want to say? Knit together all the information that is pertinent to that system in a week. So each class has like a week's worth of information, and you have class 3 days a week for that. So if you're thinking about, you're planning for medical school at OUM, you can think about planning for having classes 3 days a week. All of those classes are recorded, so you're able to watch them double time later on if you want to study. You're also welcome to attend them asynchronously as well. We try to encourage you to come to those classes live because you'll get a bit more out of the discussion if you do that. But we do have students who are working or taking care of families and just attend those classes asynchronously. So after your preclinicals is your transition phase. So that's where you're going to learn things like behavioral medicine, humanities, ethics, do a little bit more advanced clinical skills, application of your preclinical activity to actual clinical skills, really getting you prepared to safely enter your clinical rotations, safe for yourself and safe for any patients that you encounter. So there's 2 clinical transition courses, and each of them are 8 weeks. If you're on the USMLE pathway, in between those 2 courses, you take your prep course for your USMLE Step 1, you take the NBME practice exam, and then you take your USMLE Step 1 and pass it. And then you complete your second clinical transition unit. And then after completion of your transitions, you go into the clinical years that Dr. Elza was just talking about. So it's about 4.5, 5-year type of program. The first set is your intensive kind of science and systems-based courses, and the second half is your clinical rotations, where you're on site in hospital and in clinic. So not really dissimilar to any other type of medical school. The big difference is really that you've got your first set of your course. All your preclinicals are available to you online. All right, let's go back to our question set, and then we'll answer a little bit more from Q&A. So people want to know a little bit more about like getting residency in Canada and whether they're eligible to practice in Canada. So do you think OUM is a good fit for Canadian students who want to get residencies in Canada, want to practice in Canada? What would that be like for them?
So yes, I think that the way residency programs view us, potential candidates who have not completed their medical school out in Canada, it's a level playing field, what I will say. So it's really up to the individual student and how you approach your time in medical school, how you did on your exams, how long it took you to complete everything, what references you have, where you did some of your rotations. So we do have students, I know personally, many students who matched back to Canada who did offshore studies anywhere, in Europe. I have students who did stuff in Africa, in Caribbean. So it's really up to the student. You definitely can match if that's your goal. When you do go back to Canada as a foreign graduate, you do have to do a return of service. So that is something that often students consider. And what they end up doing is actually going to the States and completing residency there. And then the transition, once you're a licensed physician in the US, it's quite easy to just practice in Canada afterwards. And now Ontario just lifted all restrictions actually as of this month for US-based physicians to come over. Before, you had to do about a year of supervised clinical practice, which wasn't really that awful, but now that is gone. So it's actually has become even easier.
I think BC as well, like in the last month, had removed that.
Oh, I just only saw the Ontario one, but it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Um, so I'll give some additional details on that as well. But there's yes, the short answer is like, yes, you're going to be able to practice in Canada
Great.
or in the US. So if you are a Canadian citizen or permanent resident, your pathway, you can get a little bit more information from the Medical Council of Canada. Just go to their website, but I can give you some information here as well. They'll tell you that you have to graduate from what they call an acceptable medical school. And then they'll tell you, oh, an acceptable medical school means that it has to be listed in the World Directory of Medical Schools, and it has to have a Canada sponsor note. So you could go to the World Directory of Medical Schools right now and look up Oceania, and you'll see its registration in the World Directory. And if you click on sponsor notes, it'll have its Canada sponsor note there. So if you go to medical school at OUM and you graduate from OUM, you fit within that criteria. You'll have to demonstrate your proficiency in English or French most of the time when you are a graduate of an international medical school. Even if you are born and raised in Canada, you still may have to demonstrate your proficiency in English or French, but that should be no problem for you. I had answered a question in our last session that I just wanted to clarify a little bit. I said I wasn't sure about uh, if the match through CARMS in Quebec, whether students would be eligible. But I can tell you now that there's an additional equivalence process through the Collège de Médecine du Québec. So basically you have to pass your French language test, and there's a few other qualifications that they have for that. So you're not ineligible to practice in Quebec through OUM, but there's a few extra hoops to jump through if you don't go to a French language medical college and want to practice there. You'll have to take the NAC and MCC QE in order to get your credentials verified through CARMS and through Physicians Apply, which is an MCC Medical Council Canada supported program. And as I said before, OUM has programs in place to help support you to take the NAC and the MCC QE. In fact, you get out of a couple of the graduation requirements that we have for other OUM students. Other OUM students have to take what we call the OSCEs, the Objective Structured Clinical Exam, where you have to go around to several stations with patient actors. We don't require you to do OUM's OSCE because you're going to be taking the NAC in school, so you can get a little bit of a pass there, but we do prepare you for that. And if you can apply through CARMS, through the IMG stream or the return of service stream for your residency. And as Dr. Elza said, they do have practice ready assessments or the practice eligibility route if you complete your residency outside of Canada. And it used to be a lot longer, but provinces are now lifting that, especially for clinicians who are trained in the US, which is why even if you are a Canada-based student at OUM, we're going to prepare you to be able to get your match within the US if that's what you want to do. If you want to match in the US, do your residency in the US, and then come to Canada, you'll be able to do that as well to have your practice there. So provinces are making it easier for foreign trained physicians. So I even imagine that these qualifications that I'm mentioning now will probably be easier for internationally trained graduates by the time any of you would graduate from OUM, but these are the current requirements for that. So yeah, go ahead. Did you want to add something?
I've also had some friends and family members who matched to programs on the border, like Buffalo and Syracuse, where they're pretty close to home, and they can go home pretty frequently and visit family and things like that. So there's options for that. And of course, then there's also those that match within Canada, but sometimes you'll end up somewhere far away, but in Canada. So you have to be mindful of that. So there's lots of options.
Yeah, I think our last Canadian graduate, the one who's now practicing in Alberta, she, if I'm remembering this correctly, she went through both the match in the US and CARMS in Canada, and she matched in both, but she ultimately took her residency position up in Alberta just to be closer to family. But she was looking, I think, like in Montana. Montana's right below
Yep.
Alberta,
Yep.
right? I'm
Very
forgetting
close.
my
Yeah.
geography.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of border cities that I even had people live like in Canada and then just commute across the border to Buffalo. So, yeah,
It's a good way to like hedge your
or Windsor. Yeah, the
and I think there's like I think there's like 40,000 residency positions in the US, but there's only like 28,000 grads from US medical schools. So there's a lot of positions available for residency in the US if you can meet those requirements, which you absolutely will.
Mhm.
Um, through our program. Renee saw that you went to SUNY Downstate and wondered if that was an option or anything you want to say about SUNY Downstate for
I've had
anyone
actually, there was a lot of Canadians there with me and who are actually now practicing, all of them are practicing in Canada. So, of course, it's an option. A lot of programs do love Canadian students just because they're just a lot of residency programs are looking at the person, the individual, the work ethic, the personality. Um, they look more, their ability to handle stress and interact with people. And, Canadians leave a really good impression, I will
you
say.
do.
Well, overall, I don't think you'll have any trouble matching the New York and within the New York system that it's a really common, lots of Canadians there, Massachusetts, like I mentioned, upstate New York, Syracuse, Vermont.
I mean, who doesn't like Canadians? Who wouldn't want Canadian doctors in their hospitals? Okay, so what do you think? Like, what's your advice? What should all medical students know before they embark, or what should prospective students know before they think about applying or before they enter medical school?
I think they have to know that going to an offshore school is not as bad as it sounds. It's really on you and the time you are going to put in. What I loved about medical school, which I didn't find this with other areas like psych, psychology or where you're writing thesis papers and things like that, was whatever you put in is what you get back. So the time you put in studying, the time you put in learning, you typically get back the results, which so you do have to put in time. You have to dedicate time to study the materials because there's a lot. Um, but if you can do it from home, I think it is easier than being away. So I think you have to be prepared to study hard, but if you are prepared, and I will say Canadian universities are very hard. They are so hard compared to American schools, that I found after going to McGill studying psychology, the tests were very hard. And when I went to my medical school, I felt like it was easier. I don't know. So I do, and overall, Canadian students do perform better in offshore schools just because of that reason, because our universities are so much harder.
Um, I didn't really think about that before because, like, I went to UVic for my undergrad, and then I went down and I was at UC Berkeley for my graduate degree, and I was like, they have really low expectations of me here. Like,
Had a
I
Harvard
feel
professor
like
come.
I'm just like
Yeah.
doing the minimum, and they're like, oh. And then I came back up and did my first postdoc at UBC, and I was like, oh yeah, this is the this is the normal level
And
of.
schools are tough. They're universities, they're not colleges. We had a Harvard professor come teach one summer, and he said, "You guys did so much better than so just because we don't have the hard requirements to get into universities, our actual university experience is much harder than that of the US." So I do think generally Canadian students are better prepared for what um, the studying that is required for medical school.
Just because you talked about requirements, I'm just going to sneak in our last few minutes because people sometimes ask about like the requirements for applying to OUM. So we don't require our students to take the MCAT. You're welcome to take it and you're welcome to submit your scores. A lot of Canadian medical schools will have a minimum MCAT score that you need for eligibility. We don't have a minimum MCAT score because we're really interested in the whole person. We'll look at your MCAT score, but we're looking at that in the context of your entire application. We also don't require Casper. We will accept Casper to give us a better idea of your level of professionalism and kind of how your mind works, but we don't have a kind of specific level that we're looking at in Casper. We do look for at least a 3.0 on a 4.0 GPA scale or its equivalent. But also we don't treat that as like a hard stop minimum. We will accept applications for students who are kind of on the border just below that, as long as other areas of their application are fairly strong. So something important to know. And just if we have any Australia-based students, we also don't require GAMSAT. We will accept GAMSAT, but we don't require that as part of our admissions process. Dr. Elza, do you have, hope about our future generation of Canadian clinicians and our future generation maybe of Australian and Samoan and US clinician, especially people like students from OUM who are coming from more diverse, more experience-based background? What do you think the future of medicine is going to look like for these folks?
I think we need more physicians in Canada. We need more support. The healthcare system really needs you guys, and I think you should take the plunge and come study with us and not wait and stick around and hear it's so hard to get into Canadian schools. And I just tell people just do it. Save a year, save 2 years because that time is precious. By the time I had completed my medical school, majority of my friends were just starting their medical school in Canada. And I had already been practicing a couple of years before they completed. And the funny thing in the end, they ended up, a lot of them left and they went to the States. Um, so just because you're not going the traditional route doesn't change what kind of doctor you will be in the future. And it doesn't really carve any sort of path for you. You make your own path and it will be good. So just, but you do have to take the plunge, you have to do it.
I think like don't second guess it. If you're here now, you've got the strive. You've tried to not become a doctor for a really long time, but that feeling has not gone away. And you like cannot get rid of this like aching feeling in your chest that you want to be a doctor. So you might as well just take the plunge and like listen to your heart and just go for it because we need we need you. We need people like you, people who have taken different pathways into medicine that are really this future of medicine, of people who are thoughtful and empathetic and who have different kinds of experiences and are able to relate to all different kinds of patients in all different kinds of ways. So just go for it. If you have further questions after talking to Dr. Elza and myself
Mm.
today, we encourage you, you can reach out to us directly. But the people who can really answer every single one of your questions that you might have at the stage of being a prospective student are admissions counselors, and they're so nice. I would just call Camille and Shanda just to chat with them. I love when they set meetings with me because it's always a pleasure chatting with them. They're very nice, they're very knowledgeable, and they're happy to make time in their day to get to know you and to answer any questions you have about the program or about your qualifications and creating your pathway within our program. So thank you so much to each and every one of you who joined us today live. And thank you. And you're also welcome if you joined us via recording. And we hope to see you in one of our incoming classes soon or at our webinar again next month. So thanks so much, Dr. Elza, for making some time today. And see you again, in a couple days. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
You.